past, seeking the soul's mystic cave. At first, she stepped into a night of God, the face of dawn, out of moon twilight grew. Day came, priest of a sacrifice of joy. Into the worshipping silence of her world, he carried a mortal luster as his robe, trailed heaven like a purple scarf, and wore as his vermilion caste mark a red sun.
So we've come to Book 7, Canto 5, The Finding of the Soul, and we're at page 522, line 26. So Savitri has plunged deep within, listening to the
voice that has instructed her to find her soul. And in her inward plunge, she's already traversed various layers of her inner being. And now she is approaching her soul. In the last canto, we saw she had encountered three soul forces, and which were kind of compassion and force and light and knowledge. But each of those soul forces were limited, and they also carried with them a kind of a shadow form of their opposite, representing kind of an egoistic twist of those three forces. But now she's continued on towards the mystic cave of her soul. And in the beginning of this canto, in that first passage that we read last time, she stepped into a night of God. The light was quenched that helps the laboring world, the power that struggles and stumbles in our life. This inefficient mind gave up its thoughts, the striving heart its unavailing hopes. All knowledge failed, and the ideas forms, and wisdom screened in awe her lowly head. feeling a truth too great for thought or speech, formless, ineffable, forever the same. An innocent and holy ignorance, adored like one who worships formless God, the unseen light she could not claim nor own. So all of her egoistic seeking has quieted down into silence. And she's become just an empty vessel. And she senses the divine, the presence of the divine, and its holiness and greatness. But she cannot yet identify with it. It's something she doesn't know. She feels it's close. But she feels the inadequacy of all of her own seeking and striving. What?
What is the reason or the wider perspective, the deeper perspective, will deny that God to be nothing?
Yeah, it's just that all of this sense of separate self, which is seeking for the divine outside, we could say, or in something else other than ourselves, that sense of separation is felt as inadequate. So it just, it retires. It recedes into the background. And then there's nothing left. There's just a sense maybe of this presence of the divine, but nothing else. And yet, that divine presence, it's not known, it's not clearly seen or experienced. In these last lines of that passage, there was no strength in her, no pride of force. The lofty burning of desire had sunk, ashamed, a vanity of separate self. The hope of spiritual greatness fled. Salvation she asked not, nor a heavenly crown. Humility seemed now too proud a state. Herself was nothing, God alone was all. Yet God she knew not, but only knew He was. So she's in this kind of emptiness, a darkness. Yeah, I don't think it's a kind of a negative darkness in a way. It's just an empty vacancy. A peace is there. Even this sense of presence is there. Let's go on. We'll continue reading, and then we'll see a little more of how this experience develops. So, Sudanya, line 26. page 522.
A sacred darkness brooded now within. The world was a deep darkness, great and new. This void held more than all the teeming worlds. This blank felt more than all that time has grown. This dark knew dumbly, immensely the unknown. But all was formless, voiceless, infinite. As might a shadow walk in a shadowy scene, a small knot passing through a mightier knot, a night of person in a bare outline, crossing a fathomless, impersonal night. Silent, she moved, empty and absolute. In endless time, her soul reached a wide end. The faceless vast became her spirit place. At last a change approached. The emptiness broke. A wave rippled within. The world had stirred. Once more her inner self became her pace. There was felt a blissful nearness to the goal. Heaven leaned low to kiss the sacred hills. The air trembled with passions and delight. A rose of splendor on a tree of dreams, the face of dawn out of moon twilight grew. Day came, priest of a sacrifice of joy, into a worshipping silence of our world. He carried immortal luster as his robe, trailed heaven like a purple scarf and ore, as his vermilion cast mark a red sun.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So there is kind of a paradox to this emptiness in which she's entered, because it says this void held more than all the teeming worlds. This blank felt more than all that time has borne. This dark knew dumbly, immensely, the unknown. But all was formless, voiceless, infinite. So it's kind of a very deep silence and emptiness of being, but it holds within itself something, some divinity, some maybe fulfillment, completeness in a way. But that sense of separateness has disappeared, and there's just that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a purity. Perhaps just we can think of it as a very deep kind of silence. In that silence, it's kind of infinite. There's, it stretches everywhere, that emptiness. And then there's this image of this shadow walking in a shadowy scene. So it's like her own self is like a shadow walking in a darker shadow or something. So it's just an emptiness, a small knot, nothingness passing through a mightier knot. A night of person in a bare outline, crossing a fathomless, impersonal night. Silent she moved, empty and absolute. In endless time, her soul reached a wide end. Again, it's just infinite, open. The spaceless vast became her spirit's place. So she's kind of identified in a way with that vast, infinite quietude, emptiness. But then the experience changes, and something within that stirs, and again a kind of a presence, a sense of self returns. Once more her inner self became her space. But now she also begins sensing somehow this soul deep within, and its delight, its beauty that emanates from it. There was felt a blissful nearness to the goal. And then heaven leaned low to kiss the sacred hill. The air trembled with passion and delight. Some presence is there, the divinity, the divine, is coming down to touch the being. And the hill, this sacred hill, I imagine also represents the physical matter, the divine coming down, touching matter, touching her physical self. But then also, at the same time, there seems to be a kind of a return to the outward scene, because we see that the dawn is coming, light, the day is arriving. So the air trembled with passion and delight. So in a sense, it's just the early morning dawn, and now he's beginning to also describe the outer scene. But at the same time, I think it's tied with her inner experience of this nearness of the soul. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's this change coming with the light. Oh. Yeah, it does. It has that sense of nirvana, and we'll see I think in the next canto, she enters into this nirvana. Right, right, right.
It has not this from daytime, this separation, exactly.
Right. Yeah, there's an interesting kind of parallel seems to be going on here with the night turning into the day and her going through this inner emptiness towards a kind of a positive experience of the divinity. Right, so there's these two things that seem to be going on simultaneously here. So now, out of this emptiness, something stirs. The air trembled with passion and delight. A rose of splendor on a tree of dreams. This rose of splendor also is, I think, speaking of the dawning light, the rose in the sky, I think. Then the face of dawn out of mooned twilight grew. Day came, priest of a sacrifice of joy, into the worshiping silence of her world. He carried immortal luster as his robe. So this is the dawn. Or no, this is the day, I guess. Trailed heaven like a purple scarf and wore. So this purple scarf also, I think, is the purple in the sky. But it's also perhaps symbolizing something of the nobility, the royalty of the divine presence. And wore as his vermilion caste mark a red sun. Yeah. But yeah, it's, we had in the beginning of the poem the symbol dawn, and we saw there also this kind of darkness of night and then the dawn coming in that. So it's kind of being repeated here in Savitri's experience. Caste mark. Yeah, he's but it's the sun, it's the dawn, but he's speaking of this inner kind of aspect of it, of this divinity coming. The sun in the sense of the divine presence coming. And he's wearing this caste mark of the red sun. Yeah, he, right. Yeah. Representing the supermental, and it's interesting, the red sun maybe also kind of, the red is generally representing the physical, maybe coming into the physical. Or purple scarf, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, many have this big red mark on their foreheads. So. Well, it is. He's symbolizing, he's using that as a symbol. But he's speaking of this day coming with this cast mark of the sun. So let's continue, Margaret.
As if an old remembered dream come true, she recognized in her prophetic mind the imperishable luster of that sky, the tremulous sweetness of that happy air, and, covered from mind's view and life's approach, the mystic cavern in the sacred hill, and knew the dwelling of her secret soul. As if in some Elysian occult depths, truth's last retreat from thought's profaning touch, as if in a rock-templed solitude hid, God's refuge from an ignorant worshipping world. It lay withdrawn even from life's inner sense, receding from the entangled heart's desire. A marvelous brooding twilight met the eyes, and a holy stillness held that voiceless space. An awful dimness wrapped the great rock doors, carved in the massive stone of matter's trance. Two golden serpents round the lintel curled, enveloping it with a pure and dreadful strength, looked out with wisdom's deep and luminous eyes. An eagle covered it with wide conquering wings, flames of self-lost immobile reverie. Doves crowded the grey musing cornices, like sculptured postures of white-bosomed peace.
Thank you. I think we get some nice descriptions of the experience of the soul, or the presence of the soul within. Like with these words, like the tremulous sweetness of that happy air. The soul The presence of the soul often carries that feeling of sweetness and delight. Earlier he had said the air trembled with passion and delight. There's also this kind of trembling sensation. It's something so kind of powerful and sweet and beautiful and quiet all at the same time. It's some kind of vibration. Well, he says, as if an old remembered dream come true. So she has a sense that perhaps she's experienced this before. She knows something of... She's again encountering her soul. And there's been a separation, perhaps, from her soul in her childhood, her youth. And now she's re-experiencing it again. She's finding her soul, where she's her true self, but also kind of, her origin, where she's come from. We all know that our deepest self, we know the divine in some way because we've come from the divine. And so when we encounter it as we approach the presence of the divinity within us, it's something we know. There's a recognition that comes. Yes. Yes. And also in between lives, our soul goes to the psychic world, which also has the same kind of vibration. The sweetness and beauty and fullness and holiness and, the silence, all of that combined. We all come from that place, and we return to it after our lives here. But in our lives, when we touch our soul, we feel that presence again. And that's an eternal presence that's there. It's always there. Yeah. He says the sacred hill twice. He repeats that. Yeah, and it's a presence of the divinity in matter, right? They were material beings here, and that presence is within matter itself. And when we go deep within, she goes into this kind of cavern in the hill. Yeah. So yeah, there's some Greek allusions here. Elysian occult depth. Elysian. So let's see. Elysian is a dwelling place of the blessed after death in the Greek. But in a general terms, it's also used as a state of ideal happiness. So it's kind of a heaven. It's kind of like heaven. Yeah. So where the souls go after death. In the Vedas. The divine light represented by the cows are hidden in the hill, in the cave of the hill. And then, these rishis go and find and release the cows from the penned up in the hill. So it's a symbolic story of that, and here it's a little bit represented, I think, also. Let's read just a little bit more of this that kind of, again, reiterates that atmosphere of the soul, as if in a rock temple's solitude hid, God's refuge from an ignorant, worshiping world. It lay withdrawn even from life's inner sense, receding from the entangled heart's desire. A marvelous, brooding twilight met the eyes, and a holy stillness held that voiceless space. So a mother speaks of this depth going deep down, like into a tunnel, deep within. It's far deep within and removed in a way from this outer surface of life, with all its desires and its movement of mind and all of that. It's kind of hidden deep within in this silence. Yeah, somehow I think the soul is of our ambitions, whatever it may be. We can't experience that soul, that divinity. We have to draw back. Yeah, all the pujas and worshiping. Yeah, I think this is something that B sometimes refers to this, always looking at the divine outside instead of within. Here he's kind of emphasizing you have to go deep within to find it. It's not out there somewhere or up in the sky or. So she enters into the depths of the temple and there's nothing there. Is that it? Kind of an emptiness, maybe. Mm. Mm. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the common people, they have a kind of an outward worship, and it's kind of just on the surface, and they don't perhaps connect it with their inner being or with the inner sense of the divine. See, I think, but it's interesting that the divinity is also in the outward things, no? But if we kind of mistake the surface things for that inner divinity, that's the mistake. But if we try to experience that divinity in others or in the temple or in the idol even, that divinity is also there. But if we just stop at the idol or at the surface person, then we're missing the deeper experience and the deeper truth. She was also Buddhist, no? She was Buddhist, so it would be quite natural for her to find nothing behind the curtain. Yes, for her. But maybe for somebody else, he might find something. For yeah, I mean, it could be Krishna or somebody for Vaishnava. Yeah, that divinity is there in outward things, in the world as well. But sometimes what we have to do is go within and find it subjectively. I mean, but we also, I was thinking that we mistake our outer self really for our true self as well, just like we mistake, the outer idols for the divinity. We mistake our mind and our life and all our concerns and all of these things. The truth of our being, it's kind of deep within in this. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Right. Uh-huh. Right. So the new physics is catching up to the spirituality. Yeah. Right. I mean, those outer religious things, bowing at the samadhi or whatever it is, I mean, it can be a kind of a superficial exercise, or it can be something where we touch the divinity also. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think all these different things eventually have to be integrated. Because we can't just sort of empty our life of everything. Because then that just means kind of going into the forest, sitting under the tree and, not moving anymore until we find the divine. And that's not the way that we're going to find a dynamic experience of the divine that takes up our energies, our movements of life. So Sri Aurobindo is aiming at this integral experience where the divine takes up our movements, our actions, our thoughts, our feelings. So we have to kind of, I think, keep them and keep even our ambitions and keep, some of our falsehoods provisionally, and more bring the divinity within them or experience the divine behind them so that it can be integrated with that divinity behind. Mm. Yeah, there are clearly different ways and different paths for different people and for different souls. So for some people, it may be a true experience that they withdraw completely. For them, for their soul, for their development, the trajectory of their soul's evolution, they may just have to go into the forest, like a sannyasi, and find the divine there. And some may have to withdraw partially, right? And so maybe you go to the ashram and you kind of withdraw from the noise and confusion of the city life and experience a greater quietude and withdrawal, but not a complete withdrawal, because you're still interacting with people at work and doing this, and you're still doing that. So that's kind of a nice kind of middle ground. And then there's some people that just may continue to act in the world and be in business or do this or that, and yet somehow they connect with the divinity in that experience. So there are different ways for different people, and we each have to find our own path in a way that's right for us. But here she's, in that experience, she's withdrawing deep within. But we can also do that, in the world. We can have our periods of meditation where we withdraw deep within ourselves and reconnect with that divinity, and then again engage in life, in the world, and we try to bring out that presence and that some of that experience into the outer consciousness. So the two are not necessarily incompatible, but now she's withdrawing deep within. But she's withdrawing in the depths of matter, in the depths of her own physical being. And as she does, she's experiencing some kind of symbolic kind of vision or experience. And so there are these symbolic representations in the massive stone of matter's trance, the serpents round the doorway of this inner cavern, curling, enveloping it with their strength, looking out with wisdom's deep and luminous eyes, and an eagle covering it with wide, conquering wings. So this is that entryway into the depths of her being. And then in the corners, the gray musing cornices like are these doves.
Sleep. She entered in and found herself amid great figures of gods, conscious in stone and living without breath, watching with fixed regard the soul of man. Executive figures of the cosmic self, world symbols of immutable potency. On the walls, covered with significant shapes, looked at her, the life scene of man and beast, and the high meaning of the life of gods. The power and necessity of these numberless worlds and faces of beings and stretches of world space spoke the succinct and inexhaustible hieratic message of the climbing plains. In their immensitude signing infinity, they were the extension of the self of God and housed impassively receiving all, his figures and his small and mighty acts, and his passion and his birth and life and death and his return to immortality. To the abiding and eternal is their climb. To the pure existence everywhere the same. To the sheer consciousness and the absolute force and the unimaginable and formless bliss. To the mirth in time and the timeless mystery of the triune being who is all and one, and yet is no one but himself apart.
Thank you. So as Savitri enters across the threshold into her deep inner self, near to the soul, so she sees these gods and the planes of existence represented there on the walls. The gods, conscious in stone and living without breath. So they seem to be kind of on the stone walls, but they're living presences. They're not just carvings. World symbols of immutable potency on the walls, covered with significant shapes, looked at her the life scene of man and beast, and the high meaning of the life of gods. The power and necessity of these numberless worlds and faces of beings and stretches of world space spoke the succinct and inexhaustible hieratic message of the climbing planes. So earlier in the book, Aswapati experienced something like this. And it was described as the world stare. And so he saw this climbing of different planes like a pile of worlds on top of one another, climbing from matter up into the spirit. I want to read just a little of that. As if from matter's plinth and viewless base to a top as viewless, a carved sea of worlds, climbing with foam-maned waves to the supreme, ascended towards breadths immeasurable. It hoped to soar into the ineffable's reign. 100 levels raised it to the unknown. So it towered up to heights intangible and disappeared in the hushed, conscious vast. As climbs a storied temple tower to heaven, built by the aspiring soul of man to live near to his dream of the invisible. Infinity calls to it as it dreams and climbs. Its spire touches the apex of the world, mounting in great voiceless stillnesses. It marries the earth to screened eternities. Amid the many systems of the one, made by an interpreting creative joy, alone it points us to our journey back, out of our long self-loss in nature's deeps. Planted on earth, it holds in it all realms. It is a brief compendium of the vast. So a compendium, I think it's a brief summary. We hold within ourselves this whole hierarchy of worlds. And she's experiencing something of that in the depths of her soul. She's seeing these different planes of existence and the gods. This was a single stare to being's goal, a summary of the stages of the spirit, its copy, of the cosmic hierarchies, refashioned in our secret air of self, a subtle pattern of the universe. It is within, below, without, above. That's interesting. So she too sees all of these climbing planes in their immensitude signing infinity, kind of being a sign of infinity, because they include everything. They include all the different planes, all the different aspects of the being. They were the extension of the self of God, and housed impassively, receiving all his figures and his small and mighty acts, and his passion, and his birth, and life, and death, and his return to immortality. To the abiding and eternal is their climb. To the pure existence everywhere the same. To the sheer consciousness and the absolute bliss, absolute force, and the unimaginable and formless bliss. To the mirth in time and the timeless mystery. This plunge down into matter of the divine being in the soul, to experience this mirth in time, this happiness of life in the physical world, but joining that with the timeless mystery of the triune being who is all and one, and yet is no one, but himself apart. All these planes of existence are extensions of God, including our own physical plane here, and each contains all of the divine within it. Here represented in this place. Ramsha? You want to read or no? Okay. You read as much as you like. Oh, second line from the bottom. Microphone close.
There was no step of breathing men, no sound, only the living nearness of the soul. Yet all the worlds and God himself were there. For every symbol was a reality and brought the presence which had given it life. All this she saw and inly felt and knew, not by some thought of mind, but by the self. A light, not born of sun or moon or fire, a light that dwelt within and saw within, shedding an intimate visibility, made secrecy more revealing than the word. Our sight and sense are a fallible gaze and touch. and only the Spirit's vision is wholly true. As thus she passed in that mysterious place, through room and room, through door and rock-hewn door, she felt herself made one with all she saw. A sealed identity within her woke. She knew herself the beloved of the Supreme. These gods and goddesses were he and she. The mother was she of beauty and delight. The word in Brahma's vast creating clasp. The world, puissance on Almighty's she was lap. The master and the mother of all lives, watching the worlds their twin regard had made. And Krishna and Radha forever entwined in bliss, the adorer and adored, self-lost and one.
Thank you. As she enters closer to the soul, she feels this identity with all, this sense of kind of a separate knowledge is receding, and she's just feeling her oneness with everything. This it's a knowledge more by identity of the self. She is the self of all this. So it's a light not born of sun or moon or fire, a light that dwelt within and saw within, shedding an intimate visibility, made secrecy more revealing than the word. Our sight and sense are a fallible gaze and touch, and only the Spirit's vision is wholly true. So she's experiencing that spiritual vision and knowledge coming from identity, a sealed identity within her woke. And now she's also identifying with the mother, of whom she is an incarnation. She knew herself the beloved of the Supreme. These gods and goddesses that she's seeing were he and she. The mother was she of beauty and delight. The word in Brahma's vast creating clasp. She is the word. She is the expression of the divine. This is the Shakti, the mother. The world puissance on Almighty Shiva's lap. Again, another reference to the divine Shakti seated on Shiva's lap, the silent divinity, the master and the mother of all lives, watching the worlds their twin regard had made, and Krishna and Radha forever entwined in bliss, the adorer and adored, self-lost and one. That's also part of that intention, I guess, behind this whole creation, for the divine to find the divine in love. the adorer and adored, self lost and one. And let's read one more.
In the last chamber, on a golden seat, one sat whose shape no vision could define. Only one felt the world's unattainable fount, a power of which she was a straying force, an invisible beauty, goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is a beam, a greatness without whom no life could be. Thence all departed into silent self, and all became formless and pure and bare. Then, through a tunnel dug in the last rock, she came out where there shone a deathless sun. A house was there, all made of flame and light, and crossing a wall of doorless living fire, there suddenly she met her secret soul. A being stood, immortal in transience, deathless, dallying with momentary things, in whose wide eyes of tranquil happiness, which pity and sorrow could not abrogate, infinity turned its gaze on finite shapes. Observer of the silent steps of the hours, eternity upheld the minute's acts and the passing scenes of the everlasting's play. In the mystery of its selecting will, in the divine comedy a participant, the Spirit's conscious representative, God's delegate in our humanity, comrade of the universe, the transcendence ray, she had come into the mortal body's room to play at ball with time and circumstance.
Thank you. So finally, Savitri encounters her soul, whom she sees seated on a golden seat, but one whose shape no vision could define. So it's kind of indefinable. An invisible beauty, goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is a beam, a greatness without whom no life could be. Well, it's still not the end. Thence all departed into silent self, all became formless, pure, and bare. This personal and impersonal aspects of the divine, the formless and the form, are kind of intertwined always in Sri Aurobindo's view, two aspects of the divinity. Then, through a tunnel dug in the last rock, she came out where there shone a deathless sun. A house was there all made of flame and light, And crossing a wall of doorless living fire, there suddenly she met her secret soul. So a being stood, immortal in transience, deathless, dallying with momentary things. So this is the soul, huh? It's immortal, and yet it's come into the world of momentary things, into time. But it's pure. It's kind of hidden deep within, in whose wide eyes of tranquil happiness, which pity and sorrow could not abrogate, could not deny, could not negate. Infinity turned its gaze on finite shapes. Observer of the silent steps of the hours, eternity upheld the minute's acts. So that soul supports our lives, all the movements, all the struggles, all the journey that we undertake through many lives. It supports that. And the passing scenes of the everlastings play. In the mystery of its selecting will. So it chooses, I guess, its path in the journey of life, in the divine comedy, a participant. It's kind of a great comedy because, as he'll say later, it's all kind of a masquerade of the divine. All of this is some expression of the divine, enjoying this journey into time in order to play at ball with time and circumstance. Yeah, it's well, first she's going through and she's seeing the gods and goddesses and seeing everything, and she's identified with all of that. Okay. And then she goes to the last chamber on a golden seat, one sat, whose shape no vision could define. So then this seems to be some kind of impersonal side aspect of the divinity. There's a power, there's a light, there's a bliss, but it's formless. Well, it becomes personal in the next vision, where she crosses a door of, or a wall of doorless living fire, and then meets her secret soul, and it's a being. Right. So she's seeing the whole symbolism of all the planes of existence, including the gods and goddesses. And she identifies with all of that and all of them, these gods and goddesses, Krishna and Radha. Shiva and Brahma, whatever. The world puissance on Shiva's lap, the word in Brahma's vast creating clasp. So she identifies with these two aspects of the divine there, but she continues inward. She sees this impersonal experiences, this impersonal existence seated on a rock, golden seat. And then she meets this being. And he'll describe her in the next section more. Yeah, we could say that, the kind of personal aspect of the divinity of the soul. The soul is a kind of a representation, an individual representative of the divine. But it carries also this impersonal and personal sides. We're out of time, we should stop. We'll talk about it more next time.
In the last chamber, on a golden seat, one sat, whose shape no vision could define. Only one felt the world unattainable found, a power of which he was the staying force, an invisible beauty goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is deep, a greatness without whom no life could be.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.